Julia Morel, a determined and respected inspector in his police station, had always been faithful to his principles. Justice, truth, and integrity guided her work, and she had never allowed herself to be corrupted by temptations or pressure. But that day, something changed. Sitting at her desk, she was reviewing old files for a side investigation. Among these cases, the one concerning Judge Laurent Vasseur caught his attention. This judge, known for his honesty and rigor, had been accused of embezzlement and had seen his career broken. However, some elements in the documents did not make sense. The dates seemed shifted, the evidence fragile, and the testimonies inconsistent. The more she studied the file, the more Julia felt that she was facing a manipulation. Intrigued, she consulted the archives and records related to the case. What she discovered made her shudder. The evidence had been clearly falsified, and several witnesses seemed to have been intimidated to make incriminating statements against Vasseur. Even worse, everything seemed to point to an internal operation, orchestrated by someone high-ranking in the police. The same evening, Julia stayed late at the office, unable to divert her attention from what she had just discovered. She felt that she was touching something much broader than a simple judicial error. But to confirm her suspicions, she needed to confront one person. Her direct superior, Commissioner Paul Renaud. Renaud, an authoritarian but charismatic man, had a reputation for protecting his agents at all costs. Julia hoped, basically, that he was not involved. The next day, she took her courage with both hands and entered Renaud's office. The latter, sitting behind his large oak desk, welcomed him with his usual smile, but his gaze immediately pierced Julia's concern. "Julia, what brings you? You seem worried." She sat in front of him, her back straight, her gaze fixed. "Commissioner, I have an important question. Do you remember the case concerning Judge Vasseur?" Renaud arched an eyebrow, surprised by his question. "Of course. Why? It's a closed case." Julia hesitated for a moment, but decided to start. "I have examined the file in detail, and there are inconsistencies. The evidence appears to be falsified. Commissioner, were you aware of all this?" Renaud's smile slowly faded. He crossed his arms and stared at her, silently, before answering in a deeper voice. "Julia, you're a good inspector, but I don't understand why you dig into classified cases. Forget it." But Julia refused to give in. "I can't let it go. If evidence has been tampered with, if an innocent man has been destroyed for obscure reasons, it is not justice." Renaud stood up abruptly, bypassing his desk to stand in front of her. "You don't understand, Julia. It's not a game. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions to protect order. Vasseur is not as innocent as you think. He is an idealist who would have endangered everything we have built." "Everything you've built?" Julia replied, her voice trembling with anger. "You broke his career to maintain a corrupt system. Is that your idea of justice?" Renaud hit his desk violently with his fist. "Stop playing vigilante. It's not an ideal world. Here, it's a question of power and control. If you're smart, you will forget all this." Julia looked him straight in the eyes. What he did not know was that she had hidden a recorder in his jacket pocket, capturing every word he said. But she was not yet ready to unveil her game. "I can't forget," she whispered before leaving her office. That evening, she secretly went to Judge Vasseur. He now lived alone, isolated, and had lost all confidence in justice. When Julia handed him the recording, he remained silent while listening to it, his face hardening with each word. When he looked up, a glimmer of hope mixed with anger shone in him. "Thank you, Julia. What you did is incredible. But Renaud will not remain inactive. He knows how to defend himself, and he will not hesitate to silence you." Julia nodded, aware of the danger. She knew she had crossed a point of no return. Later in the night, on her way home, Julia found her apartment upside down. The drawers had been emptied, his belongings thrown on the floor. Someone was obviously looking for the recording. Her heart was beating a lot, but she forced herself to stay calm. She immediately called Vasseur. "It started," she said, trying to control her voice. "They came to your house." He replied, worried. "Yes, but I'm fine. For the moment." The next day, Julia and Vasseur handed over the evidence to the prosecutor, as well as to several national media. The impact was immediate. A scandal broke out, shaking the police station and resulting in the suspension of Renault and several complicit officers. Julia became a heroine in the eyes of some, but a traitor to others. The weeks that followed were difficult. Her colleagues were divided. Some discreetly congratulated her for her courage, while others turned their backs on her. The tension was palpable, but Julia remained firm. She knew she had done the right thing. A few months later, when she thought she could finally turn the page, Vasseur contacted her again. They found themselves in a small, discreet office, away from the media turmoil. This time, the atmosphere was calmer, but the weight of their discoveries remained heavy. "Julia, you did something extraordinary. Thanks to you, we were able to expose some of the corruption. But this is only the beginning," he says, handing him a pile of new files. Julia, exhausted, looked at the files before looking up at him. "Do you want me to continue?" she asked, hesitantly. "Yes, the system is much more corrupt than we thought, but it will require even more courage, and it will put you in danger." Julia thought for a long time. She knew that continuing this fight meant giving up a quiet life, but she could no longer close her eyes. "Where do we start?" Vasseur sketched a smile and opened the first file. Julia inhaled deeply. She knew she was engaged in an even more difficult struggle, but she was ready to do anything to defend the truth.